How heartbroken it is to carry out justice, yet be denied freedom in the eyes of your own neighborhood. During the Dark Ages of Europe, few roles were more feared or more reviled than that of the executioner. Tasked with enforcing the harshest sentences of the law, these men wielded authority over life and death. Yet, while they acted under legal command, society treated them as if they themselves were criminals or outcasts. It was so bad that the priest detested them and always tell them that judgment and justice should be left to God the Messiah and not in the hands of any mortal being. Despite being appointed by the state or sanctioned by royal decree, executioners were often barred from entering churches, participating in Mass, or even receiving sacraments. Known as Scharfrichter in the German-speaking Holy Roman Empire, or simply as the hangman in England, their presence was believed to defile sacred spaces. In some towns, priests refused to hear their confessions. Others allowed it, but only from a distance, behind screens or outside the church walls. This spiritual exclusion was not only humiliating, it cast a long shadow over their souls. In a deeply Christian society where salvation and community worship were central to identity, the message was clear. Your work may serve man's law, but it violates God's. Theologians debated this paradox. Some, like 13th-century Dominican thinkers, argued executioners served divine justice, yet others saw them as spiritually tainted by the blood they shed. This alienation wasn't just symbolic. It affected every aspect of the executioner's life, beginning at the altar and echoing well beyond. Executioners lived in homes built outside city boundaries. Even when not performing their grim duties, executioners were marked socially, spatially, and permanently. In many medieval towns and cities, they were legally or unofficially required to live beyond the city walls, not because they posed a danger, but because their very presence was believed to bring spiritual and moral pollution. Executioners were often given houses on the outskirts, sometimes near gallows hills or cemeteries. These homes were not offered out of generosity, but out of necessity. No one else wanted to live near them. In cities like Nuremberg, Strasbourg, and Paris, historical records reveal entire hangman's quarters, Henkerhäuser, placed far from markets, churches, and community centers. The message was clear: justice must be done, but not seen, and certainly not welcomed. This forced separation served multiple functions. It physically removed the executioner from daily town life, reinforcing his outsider status. It also ensured his children would grow up on the margins, far from the institutions and networks that shaped civic identity, forbidden from touching goods in public markets. To live as a medieval executioner was to be surrounded by invisible walls, none more humiliating than those imposed in the very heart of public life, the marketplace. In many towns across Europe, executioners were legally prohibited or socially discouraged from touching goods in open markets with their bare hands. The stigma of their profession was so strong that even the act of selecting produce or bread was seen as contaminating. Local ordinances from cities like Augsburg and Basel reveal explicit restrictions. Executioners could not handle merchandise directly, nor could they engage freely in trade. In some regions, market vendors would only sell to them if they used a stick or glove to point at the desired item, avoiding all contact. Others demanded prearranged times for them to shop after the crowds had left. This wasn't a matter of superstition alone. Many townspeople believed that the executioner's touch carried spiritual impurity, capable of tainting not just objects, but entire stalls. Such beliefs made daily tasks humiliating and alienating, denied burial in consecrated ground after death. In medieval Europe, death was not the end of judgment. It was merely the beginning of a soul's journey toward salvation. For the executioner, however, even in death, exclusion persisted. Many were denied burial in consecrated ground, their bodies laid to rest outside churchyards, beyond the reach of sacred rites. This final indignity reflected a life lived on the margins and a spiritual exile that outlasted the grave. Church law in several regions drew a clear line. Those who had spilled blood, even in service of the law, were considered ritually impure. Local parish records from towns in the Holy Roman Empire and parts of France show numerous instances of executioners being buried near crossroads, gallows fields, or in plots specifically reserved for the dishonored. No priest would officiate. No church bell would toll. This practice wasn't simply bureaucratic. It stemmed from a deeply rooted belief that the executioner, though legally employed, had spiritually defiled himself through repeated contact with death. Canon law rarely offered clear guidance on the issue, leaving individual parishes to decide. Some more compassionate clergy quietly blessed graves from a distance. Others refused entirely. As the medieval worldview placed immense weight on burial location and sacred rituals, this exclusion was devastating. In a society where eternity hinged on ritual, being cast outside holy ground meant more than dishonor. It threatened the soul's very fate. The children inherited the same social shame. The legacy of a medieval executioner did not end with his death. It extended cruelly to his children. In many parts of Europe, the social stigma attached to the executioner's role was hereditary. Sons and daughters, though innocent of any crime or participation in punishment, often inherited the same isolation, mistrust, and restrictions that shaped their parents' lives. This transmission of dishonor was both legal and cultural. In some regions, the profession was passed down from father to son, not by choice, but because few other occupations were available to them. Guilds, which controlled most skilled trades in medieval towns, routinely rejected the children of executioners. They were excluded from apprenticeships, barred from holding office, and often denied marriage into respectable families. Even those who sought to escape their family's reputation found themselves trapped by societal prejudice. In a world defined by birth, duty, and divine order, a family could be cast into permanent social exile, all because one of their own had carried out the will of the law. To live as a medieval executioner was to exist in a constant state of contradiction, indispensable yet rejected, empowered yet exiled. Their lives revealed the deep tension between justice and morality, where those who enforced order were themselves denied inclusion in the very society they protected. In a world ruled by divine law and rigid social hierarchies, punishment did not end with the condemned. It extended in silence and shame to the hand that carried it out, and even further to their descendants. Does a society that punishes its punishers reflect justice or fear? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. As Cesare Beccaria wrote in On Crimes and Punishments, it is not the intensity of punishment that has the greatest effect on the human spirit, but its permanence.